Hello and welcome to the Long John podcast with your host, Joseph Camperman. I am really excited to get this episode kicked off. Episode 13, Philadelphia Eagles 2023 season prediction, preview, all of the likes. This is going to be a very, very fun episode. Again, this is episode 13. So it is unbelievable. I can't believe it's been 13 episodes of doing this. It still amazes me how quickly time flies since I first started this show. But we are now on episode 13, Philadelphia Eagles 2023 season predictions. And again, I'm your host, Joseph Camperman. You can catch this episode live right now on YouTube and Twitter, but also you can see it on Spotify and Apple Podcasts tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That is typically when those podcasts release. And of course, it differs. So definitely be following on my social medias. Again, to kick off this episode, please do follow me on social media at the Long John Podcast on YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. And of course, my Twitter handle is the Long John Pod. I'm really excited to get started on this episode. It has been a couple weeks since the season has been released, and I decided to give it a couple weeks so I could definitely prepare you guys with some more information as I sort of dwelt on the games that the Eagles would be playing. And of course, this is going to involve other teams, so it is an exciting conversation because the cool part about any type of schedule release is it doesn't apply to just one to just one team. It really applies to a bunch of teams because there are quite a few teams playing the Eagles this year as normal. So we're going to get kicked off. I'm going to get kicked off with topic number one. And the way I'm going to do this is or is a couple segments in total. It's going to be about 6 total segments, but I'm going to split the season into 4 total segments. And that's going to be weeks 1 through 5, weeks 6 through 10, weeks 11 through 14, and weeks 15 through 18. So, of course, these are weeks, not games. Remember, there is 17 games, not 18, but there's 18 weeks because of the bye week. So, I'm going to get started off with my first week, which is week 1. The Philadelphia Eagles will be traveling to the New England Patriots for a 4:25 p.m. game to play a team that I would say most people could chalk off as a immediate win in the win column. This is an interesting one. I really think there's still a lot of questions behind whether or not this is truly Bill Belichick's last year coaching for the New England Patriots or coaching for anyone, period, for that matters. Whether he retires or goes to a different team remains to be seen, or sticks with the New England Patriots, which I highly doubt it, but there is always that chance. And then the other big question in this game is what is going to be the status of their quarterback situation? And I know that a lot of people are sort of, it's a really good question. Is Mac Jones a favorite of Bill Belichick? It's just hard for me to know this. They lose 2 years ago. Well, it'll be the second season. Their offensive coordinator in Josh McDaniels, he goes to the Raiders to become the Las Vegas Raiders head coach. And you got the feeling that Josh McDaniels was sort of the glue that held that offense together. What many people thought was a very good offensive mind. Whether he makes a good head coach, I'm not going to focus on that right now. But the departure of McDaniels a couple seasons ago now this will be the second season, definitely remains to be seen on whether that's going to affect Mac Jones moving forward. Now, of course, Mac Jones had 1 year without him, and the results were mixed. So I have week 1 as a win in the Eagles win column, starting off the season 1-0. Moving into week 2, the Philadelphia Eagles get to host Minnesota at home. And I feel like the schedule makers at this point are making a joke out of this because they get to host the Philadelphia Eagles get to host Minnesota at home at 8:15 p.m. And we all know the primetime Kirk Cousins and the whole idea behind Kirk Cousins struggling in primetime games. He would probably be the first to admit that he doesn't struggle. He will not admit that he struggles, but the evidence is there that the Eagles start the season on, and I think it sort of plays into their cards well because they start the season on a Sunday, obviously, Sunday afternoon in New England. And then 4 days later, they get to host the Minnesota Vikings at home. So yes, they start playing the season 2 games in 10 days, but they get to host the team on the Thursday night that doesn't have a historical, good historical record winning in primetime games. So I have the Eagles winning against Minnesota. The real question is who's going to be the Minnesota Vikings running back. So there are rumors that Dalvin Cook is going to get traded before the start of the season, if not before the start of training camp. And now my question is, do they roll with a guy like Alexander Madison, or do they try to involve him in a trade to a team that can send another running back to them? My guess is they probably just cut ties with Dalvin Cook if they're going to do so. And so that's a big question going into that game. In addition, they did lose Adam Thielen to the Panthers in free agency, but they did get Jordan Addison, who is a phenomenal number 2, who will be a phenomenal number 2 next to Justin Jefferson. He is going to be the guy who can take the cap off the defense. Jordan Addison was a very good receiver coming out of USC. I was very high on Addison. I actually was, potentially hoping that he would slip to the Eagles pick at pick 30. But he didn't, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm very happy with the Nolan Smith pick. In fact, I'm ecstatic. So I have the Eagles winning in Minnesota, but this is going to be an interesting game because I think it's early enough in the season to where, there's not going to be a lot of injuries. So, we always questioned, is Dalvin Cook going to be healthy? And that's a huge reason behind their success. And it seems like he has a hard time staying healthy. So maybe this plays into the cards for Minnesota. But in week 3, then of course, now the Eagles head back on the road. There's a relatively even balance starting off the season with road versus away games. They have this interesting scenario where they play Tampa Bay on the road at 7:15 p.m. Monday Night Football, and I'm really excited because it's actually an ironic thing. They play on a Thursday, and then they, instead of having a 10-day break, they actually have an 11-day break. So that's going to play into their cards well. Of course, we all know that there's no Tom Brady there this year. Baker Mayfield, it appears that this is his team. Him and Kyle Trask are going to be battling it out. I'm looking at reports. I've seen reports from multiple reporters now that are surfacing saying neither of these quarterbacks looked good in minicamp. That could be, false. Minicamp is very much a formality for rookies, and I don't know if I would put a lot of stock into the success of quarterbacks in minicamp. But with that being said, I don't have a whole lot of high hopes for Tampa Bay. I could very well see them finishing 4th in this division, which is crazy to think because this was a team a year ago that won the division. But the departure of Tom Brady has a huge rippling effect on the team, and I do not expect them to do very well this year. So I have that in the Eagles win column. So they start off the season 3-0, and then they get to host the Washington Commanders. And I will say this about the Commanders. This is a 1:00 Sunday game. It's a short-ish week, 6 days. This game could roll either way. I don't really know how I feel about the Commanders' quarterback room. The Commanders' quarterback room, consists of obviously Jacoby Brissett, but then they've got the quarterback that they drafted last year from UNC. And what I will say about the name is slipping me now. I'm looking it up, but what I will say about this quarterback is it appears that he potentially has the Commanders' starting role. At least they're going to Sam Howell. At least they're going to at least give him the opportunity to win that role. And so, of course, it remains to be seen. There is so much time. These are very early predictions. I'm going to do another season prediction as we get closer to training camp, or if not in print training camp. I'll do one more final season predictions to see how much they've changed in the last couple of months. It'll be cool to do a little bit of a evaluation on whether my win to loss ratio has changed. So I have the Eagles winning at home in Washington. It's not a game that I think will be very difficult. This is a team that they should win if they're planning on going to the Super Bowl or have aspirations. I don't think the Commanders are there yet. I think the Commanders are still a QB away from being a good team, and I'm not sold on Howell or Brissett to be that guy. So moving on to the final game of this first topic, and that is the Philadelphia Eagles versus the LA Rams. Now, this is a very, very interesting game because it's a 4:05 game on the West Coast. This starts a 2-game road stretch on the West Coast. Sorry, it's 2-game road stretch, not on the West Coast, but 2-game road stretch where they go to play the LA Rams as the beginning of the first 2-game road stretch. And the LA Rams, this is an interesting one. It's week 5. Attrition should not be setting in at this time. If it's setting in, the Rams are doomed. So I project, now this is a projection, Stafford and Cooper Kupp to both be healthy, whereas they were banged up last year. I project them to be healthy, but debatable on whether or not they are going to be ready to contribute at a high level. Both of these guys are coming off of injury-riddled seasons. I expect their play to be much better than last year, but that doesn't mean a whole lot. So I will say take this with a grain of salt, but I had the Eagles starting 5-0. and a win against the Rams in week 5. Now, of all these games, the one game that I could see be a potential upset would be the Washington Commanders game. And I know that sounds crazy, but the Washington Commanders have played well against us in the past. It's not a night game, so I expect this game to be an interesting one. The Eagles are coming off of a 6-game day break, but they play 2 games in 17 days. So they get quite a bit of space in between those games. The road trip out to LA is going to be an interesting one because this is a game they also could drop. So while I have them starting 5-0 and the Vegas odds look very promising for them to start the season 5-0, I'm not saying that it's out of the question they do drop one of these games, but I have the Eagles starting 5-0 and segueing into my next topic 2, which is weeks 6 through 10. So I have, their week 6 bout has them going as part of their leg 2 of their road trip. They are visiting the New York Jets for a 4:25 game, and this is where it's going to get interesting. So you've got a Rodgers-led team now, and Rodgers obviously traded from the Packers to the Jets. They have a young core with Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, and amongst other players. And I really think that Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, Aaron Rodgers, this is going to be a trio that I don't think a lot of people are going to want to face. I am very, very curious to see how the Eagles fare in this game. And I actually have a bold prediction, but I have the Eagles losing their first game in week 6 versus the New York Jets. And the primary reason is because of this. They are coming off of 2 road games. This will be their second road game. And, of course, they're going into their second road game. And Aaron Rodgers has the ability to pick apart a team's weaknesses. And I don't think that will change whether he goes from the Packers to the Jets. I also think that this very well could be a shootout because while the Jets do have a decent defense, I still believe that Aaron Rodgers is going to have to play really well for this Jets team to excel this year. And it's not out of the question that he does that because he does have a good supporting cast around him, something he didn't really have the last 2 years in Green Bay. So what I will say in regards to that is, how does this work in regard? Well, I guess the supporting cast in the life, it will be the last 2 years. But where I have the Jets having the slight head edge up, and of course, this is a bold prediction because I would say a lot of people expect us to win this game. But it is going to be 5 weeks of getting used to this team in real game action. And so I have Aaron Rodgers having the leg up on this and having the Eagles lose their first game, week 6 of the season. If you told me into 6 weeks and going into week 7, we'd be 5-1, I'd be pretty ecstatic. That's a pretty good record to be as a team. However, the next part goes interesting because I think that these 3 games, a lot of people look at the first 9 games of their schedule as the easy schedule. I would disagree. I think that the New York Jets and the future next 2 games, which I'm getting to now, could be a very difficult stretch. And the reason why is because we get to host Miami the week after playing New York. So there's not a whole lot of road tripping in from weeks 6 through 8. We host New York Jets. We go to New York, play New York, host the Dolphins, and then go to play in Washington. So there's not a whole lot of driving. It's no flying. It's only driving for the team. Maybe they'll fly to Washington, but I don't think they typically do. And so realistically, what this looks at right now is this is a schedule where they don't travel a whole lot. But the Miami game is going to be an interesting one. This is a Sunday night game, 8:20 p.m. It's going to be Sunday Night Football. It's going to be their third primetime game of the year. And I think they're going to have a lot of flexed games this year. And I'll go into that in more detail towards the end of this season recap or review prediction. Sorry. But I believe firmly that this Miami game could be one of the toughest games of the year. And that's primarily because you've got Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, and those 2 guys have the ability to completely shred a defense. There are rumors that Dalvin Cook gets traded to the Dolphins. And if that happens, that is going to make a awful headache for any defensive coordinator playing them. And if I'm Miami and I want to put all my eggs in one basket and say, you know what, we don't have Tyreek Hill for very long because he's confirmed that he's probably going to retire when this contract runs up. We don't have him for very long. We have him for 2 more years. More than likely, he's going to want some sort of a restructured contract in year 3 to finish off his career if he truly does retire. They're going to put all their eggs in one basket to say, is Tua the real deal? I don't believe Tua signs a contract because he's a first-round pick, so he's technically under contract for another 2 years. So I could very well see them signing him next offseason, even though he's in line for a payday now. So now it gets interesting because Miami, I have them winning. So I have them actually winning the Miami Dolphins going 6-1 within 7 weeks. And they then travel to Washington. And again, this is a game that's a toss-up. This is a divisional game. Typically, when I have my predictions, I have them losing 3 divisional games. because I really think that if you go 500 in your divisional games, you're doing pretty good because ultimately your division knows you best. They play you the most. They have the most history with you. They know your fan bases. They know what to expect. They have a lot of familiarity, and familiarity wins football games. However, I have the Washington Commanders losing to the Philadelphia Eagles, 1 p.m. Week 8. I don't think this is going to be close as well. And it really primarily boils down to because they don't have their quarterback situation figured out. Now, 8 weeks into the season, it could be that either Howell or Brissett is doing quite well. And of course, that is something that remains to be seen. But as we speak right now, there's really not a quarterback on that roster that I am truly thinking, oh, we will have a hard time playing against. It looks like Howell has the ability to potentially turn into a franchise quarterback if he's coached properly, but I just don't know if they have the coaches in play to do that very thing. And I believe this is going to be Ron Rivera's last year if they don't do well. So it's going to be interesting because you go through the halfway point of the season, 8 games after you get done with this. It's not really quite the halfway, but it's getting close. And this is really a determining factor when teams start going, okay, you're 8 weeks into the season. You either figure it out, or you're probably not making the playoffs. It's not a state of panic if you are a 500 or below team, but you got to start turning it around. So I have us winning. Going into week 9, this is probably the most exciting game of the year, one of the most at least. I plan on trying to go to this game. Philadelphia Eagles play the Dallas Cowboys in week 9 at home. And I am really, really excited about this game because more than likely, I am going to be going up to Philadelphia for this game. Like I said, it's a 4:25 game on November 5th. And it's been a while since I have seen a Eagles game in the daytime, but it's also I've never ever seen the Dallas Cowboys play the Philadelphia Eagles. So I've seen quite a few games now, but this is going to be exciting. So this is where I stand on this topic, and it's an interesting one because I think it could go both ways. And I know I keep saying that about so many of these games, but that's ultimately the toss-up that the Eagles find themselves in. The Eagles' schedule is the hardest schedule in the league this year because of strength of schedule, because of the way the weeks are lined up, and because of the amount of teams that made the playoffs last year, which I will get to here in a minute. However, the one thing about the Philadelphia Eagles that stands out is they did bolster their team. And I'm going to get to that later on in the show to show you guys what exactly they did to replace the holes that departed in free agency, whether that's through free agents or through the draft. So I will go say this. I will say this. I have the Eagles winning Dallas because I do believe the Eagles pose a threat to Dallas's defense still. Yes, Dallas went out and they got Stephon Gilmore to pair with Diggs, their other corner, but I'm not sold on the fact that that D-line is going to dominate the Eagles by taking away their run game. They did get Mazi Smith, the defensive tackle, out of Michigan, but I still, as I said, don't know if that's going to be enough to be able to stop the Eagles' run game. Michael Parsons is a very, very good player. It looks like he's going to be transitioning to a permanent defensive end role. I don't know if I like that because I do believe that he is very valuable in that hybrid player type system, but he may try to refine his pass rushing skills more, and he is a freak of athlete. So I do believe he's going to give the Eagles fits for as many years as he's on the Dallas Cowboys team. So moving into week 10, they have their bye week. And of course, if you had told me 9-1 going into the bye, I'd be ecstatic because there are a few teams that stand out that could be difficult. The New York Jets, the Miami Dolphins, the Dallas Cowboys. Those are 3 teams that are definitely stand out to you as being difficult teams. You've also got some flyers like the LA Rams if they turn it around. You've got, Washington twice, Minnesota. So this is, yes, 9 weeks into the season, you've played your easiest part of the season, according to many analysts, but I don't believe that's the case. But 9-1 is my predictions right now. Could change. Like I said, I'm doing another one of these shows later on in the offseason. But on that note of the strength of schedule, it was reported by Reuben Frank a couple of weeks ago. He's the Eagles insider. From week 9, and I'm quoting this on his article, from week 9 through week 14 of this upcoming season, the Eagles will play 5 consecutive games against teams that won at least 12 games last year and 3 straight against teams that won 13 games last year. To put this into context, Reuben quotes, only 7 NFL teams even won 12 games last year, which makes it really hard to play 5 of them in a row. But that is the reality of the Eagles' schedule. It's brutal. And I don't think I don't even think that touches the surface of how brutal that is. We are talking about 5 of the 7 teams in the NFL that won 12 plus games last year are playing the Eagles, not just in a season, but in a row. And that is 71% of the teams that won 12 plus games last year will be playing the Eagles in a row. Brutal part of the schedule, brutal part of the stretch. And I actually have it getting more brutal towards the end of that 5-game schedule. than I do in the beginning. So, segueing in to what I have as topic number 3, schedule of death. And it is weeks 11 through 14, schedule of death in parentheses, because this is truly the schedule of death for their season. And it's going to be a very exciting part of the season because I think it's going to be a very much of a turning point for this team. Can they win with Hurts as their quarterback? They proved that they could do it last year. There are still doubters out there that think last year, because of the strength of schedule, was a fluke. I would say that a large portion of the Eagles organization, Eagles fan base, including myself, fully believe in Jalen Hurts. But this is an opportunity for him to put those haters to doubt and to rest. Even though he made the Super Bowl, there's still haters there. He can put this team to rest if he goes into the schedule and wins a good amount of these games. However, if they come out flat and they lose 5 straight games, there's going to be problems, not just in questions being asked, but also questions being asked on whether they can even make the playoffs. So I have them sitting at 9-1 heading into Week 11's game versus the Kansas City Chiefs in Kansas City at 8:15 p.m. This is, again, another Sunday night football game. And like I said, I do believe there is going to be other this is not a Sunday night football game. This is a 5-12. Yeah, this is actually a Monday night football game. And so, yeah, I have the Eagles. Well, hold on a second. I'm trying to figure out this. I'm actually going to look this up for you guys right now as we speak because I have the Eagles playing. This is going to be probably, I would say, circling on the roster. This is one of their hardest games of the schedule. And of course, it seems maybe slightly oxymoron saying that because it is the Super Bowl champions we're talking about. But there's a lot more than just that. This is Big Red hosting it in his it's a Monday Night Football game, as I thought. So Big Red is hosting this game in his own stadium. The Chiefs perform very well at home. This is a loud, rowdy crowd. This is a team that just beat the Eagles in the Super Bowl. We would love to beat them a second time. On the flip side, the Eagles would love to get revenge against Big Red, revenge against the team for beating them in the Super Bowl, taking away a potential second Super Bowl from Philadelphia. And not even a potential, taking away the Super Bowl from Philadelphia that they could have had as their second ever. I know that feeling. It was a gut punch, and my initial reactions were like, man, we've got a long offseason ahead. I have a lot more of a brighter outlook on the season now than I did right after the Super Bowl loss because of the moves that Howie Roseman, the Wizard, made. But the ultimate question is here, can the Eagles pull off a win? And I have them losing this game, and I have a feeling here's why. They do come off of the schedule. They're going to be very rested. However, this is still Patrick Mahomes. The one concern that I have with the Chiefs last year is they were number 1 in points scored, but they were not number 1 in points allowed. They were not good on defense, and their points allowed ranked middle of the pack. I have a feeling that this defense has not really been bolstered as much as they should have, and they also made the weird move this year of getting rid of Orlando Brown, letting Orlando Brown walk in free agency and signing a guy that typically played right tackle. They're moving him to left, Jawn Taylor. And I'm not entirely sure if I am sold on that move because Jawn Taylor was typically a right tackle and he's now transitioning to the left tackle spot. And they gave him almost more money than Orlando Brown was requesting. So I didn't like this move at all. I thought it was a really poor move on behalf of the Chiefs. Still have them winning because it's at home. If it was in Philadelphia, I would have the Eagles winning. Because it's at home in this rowdy crowd in Kansas City, I have the Eagles losing this game, going 9-2, heading into their Week 12 showdown with Josh Allen and the Bills at 4:25 p.m. So this is also an interesting game. I'm not sold on the Bills right now, and here's the reason why. Their run game was atrocious last year. They could not run the ball. Now, that defense was very, very good, but that run game was very, very bad, and they could not run the ball, and because of that, it cost them games, I believe, especially later on in the playoffs, because if you want to establish a momentum going into a game, throughout the game, you run the ball and you run it effectively, something the Eagles have done very well the last 2 years. However, the Bills have not been able to do so. Now, there are rumors that potentially Dalvin Cook, which I feel like he's going to come up with every running back needy team, but there are rumors that Dalvin Cook potentially be playing for the Bills this year. If that's the case, that they do go out and get a guy like Dalvin Cook, I think that there's a chance that the Bills win this, but being at home, probably if they do lose the game against Kansas City, you're going to have an agitated fan base that's pissed off that wants to win. And I have the Buffalo Bills losing this game and the Eagles winning. So now we're sitting at 10-2, heading into probably what a lot of Eagles fans are circling as one of their most looked forward to games. Also, one of mine. I may go to this one instead of the Dallas game. It's still being determined. But that is Week 13's game, Philadelphia versus San Francisco 49ers at 4:25 p.m. And going back to games that I think could get flexed, I think there's a real possibility this gets flexed to Sunday Night Football. And the reason why I believe that is because I truly believe that the Eagles could very well be the top two teams in the NFC by this point, and I think it showed by my record. They've only lost 2 games, and only one, and both of them would be out of the conference, which does play into your cards. So they would be 9-2, but 9-0 in the NFC conference, and so that's going to play into their cards. And this is the real question that's surrounding the 49ers in Week 13. With Brock Purdy, their quarterback, rumored to be able to be cleared to play and start Week 1, will he be fully healthy by Week 13, which I would project for him to be? And where will the 49ers be in the playoff race? If it takes him 4 or 5 weeks, maybe 6 weeks to get fully healthy, which I do believe with an injury like this, it could take that long, do you find them being a 500 or below team heading into Week 13? And I would argue to say probably not. The San Francisco 49ers schedule doesn't pose a whole lot of problems for them early on. They do have, excuse me, I just lost my screen there. They do have an interesting schedule to start off the season, and I will just quickly rapid fire list off the games that the 49ers are playing to start off the season. Week 1 versus the Steelers, that should be a win. Week 2 versus the Rams, that also should be a win. And sorry, my computer is taking forever to load. So week 3, they play the Giants, that I would also expect to be a win. They play the Cardinals, then the Cowboys, then the Browns, then the Vikings, then the Bengals, then the Jaguars, then the Buccaneers, the Seahawks, and then the Eagles. I'm going to be honest with you right now. Going into this game, as I stated, week 13, they will have played 12 games, and I could very well see this team be a 9-3 team. I think their losses could come to the Seahawks, the Bengals, and the Cowboys. But other than that, they play the Jaguars, the Vikings, the Browns, the Cardinals, the Giants, the Rams, the Steelers, and the in no particular order. And the Buccaneers. I don't see them losing more than 4 games. And so this could be a very well an 8-4 or a 9-3 team, and you're a 10-2 team. And yeah, there's not a whole lot of a difference. This could be a very, very big game, especially being that they would, according to my predictions, not have lost a game in their conference. So this is a big, big game for both teams if my predictions go as corrected. But I do have them winning, and that's simply because I believe the Eagles fan base has more bones to pick than the 49ers does with the Eagles. And the reason why I say that is because all we've heard since the Eagles demolished the 49ers in the championship round is how much that win didn't count. And that is a blue chip that the Eagles are going to carry on their shoulders going into this game, regardless of whether they agree or they come out and say it specifically or not. So I have them winning this game and having a 11-3. I meant to say 9-2. A 10-2 record. 11-2 record going into Week 14 versus the Dallas Cowboys at home in Dallas, 8:20 p.m. And that is going to be on a Sunday Night Football. Again, this is going to be a very, very big game because for the Eagles, if you win this game, you may lock the division up this early on in the schedule in the season. I doubt it because I do believe the Dallas Cowboys are going to be one of the bigger challengers to the Eagles season this year. But it does pose a question and that a lot of us probably have. Can the Dallas Cowboys beat the Eagles, and who will actually win the division? Because if you guys do not know this, there has not been a repeat division winner for over a decade in Philadelphia, in the NFC East. And so there's a lot of not talked about motivation to be that repeat winner for the Eagles, because if they repeat, they'll be the first team to do so in a very long time. However, they're coming off a 7-day break, no short schedule, just a 7-day break. They're playing the Cowboys at home, not at home, away on Sunday Night Football. and I have them losing this game. And simply because it's in Jerry World, I hate to get um, technical, but the referees tend to, show favoritism to the home team in Jerry World, whether I like it or not. There's been some atrociously called games. Not going to blame the loss on it because you should never blame a loss on the refs. That's what they're there for, is to make calls, whether they're bad or good. But I have the Eagles losing their third game of the season, moving into the next topic. And that is simply because I do not believe Dallas is going to lose both games against the Eagles. So I think that they will split it 50-50. Dallas could win in Philly, and Philly could win in Dallas, or vice versa. So moving on to topic 14, my last topic of the season schedule preview. They are playing the Seattle Seahawks at Week 15. This is part of a 2-game road trip on the West Coast, or West Coast-ish. They are playing 425 the next Sunday. And this is where it gets interesting. I have the Eagles losing this game. And I know a lot of people are going to be going, losing to the Seahawks. And here's why. This is going to be a brutal stretch. They play the Kansas City Chiefs, the Buffalo Bills, the San Francisco 49ers, the Dallas Cowboys, and the Seattle Seahawks. In a 6-week period of time, they play 3 games away, 3 games at home, but 2 games away on the road. And West Coast stands after coming off playing the Bills, the Chiefs, and the 49ers. This is a big road game. The Seattle Seahawks did a lot to improve their team this year. They brought in arguably one of the best receivers in the draft, Njigba Smith from Ohio State. They secured Geno Smith on a 3-year deal. They brought in defensive linemen. They added a cornerback in Devon Witherspoon, probably the best cornerback in the draft. They did a lot to improve and give the 49ers a run for their money in this division, and I believe they're going to do a pretty good job doing that. So I have the Eagles losing in Week 15 versus the Seattle Seahawks. And it's going to be very, very interesting to see how the Eagles respond after 2 straight losses going into Week 16 versus the New York Giants at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I don't think this is going to be close. They play the Giants 2 times in 3 weeks, and I think that they're going to beat the socks off the Giants. They're probably going to be very mad, and then they get to host the Arizona Cardinals, and this is going to be an interesting one, and I'll focus on this one a little bit more because remember, they get to play the Arizona Cardinals. And if you guys don't know, the defensive coordinator, Jonathan Gannon for the Eagles, left to become the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals at the end of the right after the Super Bowl. Many Eagles fans were very happy about this because Jonathan Gannon was criticized for being a large portion of the reason why they lost the Super Bowl. Now, I would not go as far as saying that is correct, but I will say that he did play a large portion in the inability to make in-game adjustments, which led to the Chiefs winning the Super Bowl. So I have the Eagles, after coming off of a 2-game losing streak, I have the Eagles winning 2 straight games, heading into New York Giants game away, with the time still to be determined until probably close to the last week of the season. And I have the Eagles beating the New York Giants at home as well. Away as well. So the end schedule will officially be 13-4. And of course, in recap, Week 1, winning versus New England. Week 2, winning versus Minnesota. Week 3, winning versus Tampa Bay. Week 4, winning versus Washington. Week 5, winning versus the LA Rams. Week 6, they encounter their first loss of the season. They're 5-1 now. Week 7, they win versus Miami. Week 8, win versus Washington. Week 9, win versus Dallas. So they are now heading into Week 10, which is their bye week, as a 9-1 team. As a 8-1 team. Then heading into Week 11, they lose the game, their first game coming out of the bye versus the Kansas City Chiefs to make this an 8-2 team. And then Week 12, they will be I have them winning versus the Buffalo Bills. Week 13, winning versus the San Francisco, a very highly debated game. And that would put them, after 13 weeks, 12 games, that would put them at 10-2. Rolling into Dallas's game, where I have them losing, going to 10-3, and I think things could get interesting if they don't work out well. This could be the start of a slide, but I don't think so with the way that the Eagles' schedule finishes off the year. I do have them losing in Seattle in Week 15, and that would move them to 10-4. But I have them going on a 3-game win streak versus the New York Giants in Week 16, the Arizona Cardinals in Week 17, and the New York Giants again in Week 18, and finishing off the season 13-4. And I would honestly be ecstatic if I was an Eagles fan. And I find it very hard to believe that very few NFL, let it alone be NFC teams, win more than 13 games. So that is my Eagles schedule prediction, very, very early prediction. I'm going to go even further and going to segue into topic number 5, early NFC Championship predictions. And I know you guys are probably thinking, what in the world, Joseph? We are not even in July yet. And the NFC Championship game is not taking place until the end of January. What are you doing making a prediction over 6 months in advance? This is where it gets fun because I think that this bold prediction is going to shock a lot of people. And I'm really excited to announce for my bold prediction for NFC Championship. I have the Eagles versus the Detroit Lions. Now, don't get me started, guys. This is not something that I initially had predicted. It would be easy right now to say the 49ers or the Dallas Cowboys, who I believe are the two probably top teams in the NFC aside from the Eagles. Maybe you can throw Seattle in there. It would be sort of obvious for me to pick one of those guys. But I fully believe and fully stand by the fact that I think the Eagles could very well meet the Detroit Lions in the NFC Championship game because of this. And here's a little bit of a recap on the Eagles season from making it to the championship game. Eagles have the hardest schedule by strength of schedule, but did enough during the offseason, in my opinion, to make it back to the championship game. They lost defensive lineman Javon Hargrave. They responded by drafting the best defensive line, arguably best player in the drafting, Jalen Carter. If that works out, that could be a steal of a pick at pick 9. They lost safety Marcus Epps, but picked up Terrell Edmonds. They lost running back Miles Sanders, but picked up Rashad Penny and DeAndre Swift. They lost safety CJ Gardner-Johnson, but replaced him with Sidney Brown. They lost Isaac Seumalo, who is their offensive guard, but they have Cam Jurgens or the newly drafted tackle from Alabama, Steen. They have him to potentially replace Isaac Seumalo. They lost TJ Edwards and Nakobe Dean, and they replaced him with the drafted player in the 3rd round from Georgia last year, Nakobe Dean. And finally, they lost Kazir White, and they replaced him with the linebacker from Chicago, Nicholas Morrow. Now, the only area of concern right now for me in the spots that they didn't fill, maybe totally, is the Sidney Brown draft from Illinois, the safety who's replacing CJ Gardner-Johnson more than likely, unless their other safety, Reed Blankenship, takes that position, the job from him. Those guys, I think he will have an easier job because you've got Bradbury and Slay that were both brought back this year. Both of those guys are going to make Sidney Brown's job a lot easier, but I could see that being an area of concern in addition to the linebackers. The Eagles have never valued the linebacker position, and so I could definitely see the Eagles struggling at linebacker, but overall, this team replaced everyone, and they replaced them with good, solid players. And so now, the Detroit Lions also made serious moves this year. They brought in running back David Montgomery after losing DeAndre Swift to the Eagles. They brought in Montgomery actually before the DeAndre Swift trade, which prompted a lot of people to say he's probably going to control the running back room, and where will that leave DeAndre Swift? So of course, we now know obviously that the Eagles traded for DeAndre Swift, and that now no one's really asking any questions in regards to whether David Montgomery is going to be the starting running back, because they lost both DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams. DeAndre Swift to the Eagles, Jamal Williams to the Saints. So they now, don't have as deep of a running back core, and David Montgomery is going to slide in right there as the number 1 guy, and he's going to be a good running back. They also added CJ Gardner-Johnson, safety, cornerbacks Emmanuel Mosley and Cameron Sutton, wide receiver Marvin Jones, who had a really good career with them in the beginning before going to the Jacksonville Jaguars. They have a very stout O-line, and they have plenty of wide receiver options, especially when Williams, their player out of Alabama, who's suspended the first couple of games of the season, especially when he comes back. So I have the Detroit Lions not being the second best team in the NFC. I think the Detroit Lions are going to make it to the championship and play the Eagles for a chance at the Super Bowl. Now, I will not give my Super Bowl predictions yet because that's way too early. I plan on doing that in training camp. But moving on to topic number 6 is the AFC Championship predictions, where I have, drum roll please, the Cincinnati Bengals playing the Baltimore Ravens. Now, the obvious pick here could be the Chiefs as one of those two teams. I am not entirely sold that the Chiefs did enough on offense to warrant making it back to the championship game. But whenever you have Patrick Mahomes on your roster, anything can happen. However, the Ravens had a very, very good offseason. They signed Lamar Jackson to the big contract. They drafted wide receivers Zay Flowers. They signed Odell Beckham, who's coming off of an injury, but he's still a solid wide receiver. That makes their offense now including tight end Mark Andrews, quarterback Lamar Jackson, wide receivers Zay Flowers, Odell Beckham, and Rashad Bateman, as well as running backs J.K. Dobbins. That's a very, very, very good offensive skill set, especially for a team that going into the offseason didn't have a large portion of those guys. They brought in Zay Flowers. They brought in Odell Beckham. And those are two guys that are going to really help Lamar out. However, they also bolstered their O-line with the drafting of Iowa center Tyler Lindenbaum, which is going to help protect Lamar Jackson and hopefully keep him healthy, something he's not been able to do the last couple of years. And finally, to round off this team, their defense includes Marlon Humphrey, Roquan Smith, Kyle Hamilton, Marcus Williams, and Patrick Queen. You've got Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen, two very good linebackers, Marlon Humphrey, a very good cornerback, Kyle Hamilton, a very good safety, and Marcus Williams, a very good safety. So you've got still a very good defense. Now the D-line, needs some work after the cutting of Calais Campbell, but I still believe this is a very good team. Moving on to Cincinnati. Cincinnati's even more interesting. Cincinnati really didn't lose a whole lot of players. They did lose people on defense, but here's their analysis. They went out and they said, you know what? Joe Burrow is getting hit too much. For the second offseason in a row, they went out and they focused on the O-line. They picked up left tackle O-lineman Orlando Brown, and they picked up Cody Ford. So that is solidifying the offensive line even more. Cody Ford played for the Bills last year and was relatively good. Then, to pair with the electric offense of Burrow, this O-line, to pair with the electric offense of Burrow, running back Joe Mixon, wide receivers Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Tyler Boyd, probably the best wide receiver trio in the NFL. That is a phenomenal offensive group. And ultimately, I really think that this team is bolstered on O-line, maybe the best. I mean, bolstered on offense, maybe the best in the entire league. Pairing that with some defensive players, their defense was a real concern this year, but they decided to go out and they picked the first 3 picks in the draft. Defensive players. They drafted defensive end / defensive lineman Myles Murphy from Clemson. They drafted DJ Turner from, he's the cornerback from Michigan, a underrated corner that I was high on, and Jordan Battle, the safety out of Alabama. So those are all 3. There was concerns, especially at the defensive back position, that they were, that they lost a few guys, that they weren't going to be able to, do what they needed to do to have a decent defense. And they went out and they invested big time in 3 straight defensive players in Jordan Battle, DJ Turner, and Myles Murphy. Rounds 3, 2, and 1. And so this is a very, very interesting offseason that the Bengals had, because I don't really believe they digressed. I believe, if anything, they improved. So I have the Bengals and the Ravens representing the AFC at the championship game, and the Lions and the Eagles representing the NFC championship game. I know it's absolutely crazy to say this, but I believe all 4 of those teams are going to be poised to go on some serious runs this year. And I'm very excited to see how my predictions play out and whether they are totally off or not, because at the end of the day, they're just predictions. But segueing into my final topic of the day, topic 7, did you know a sports fact? I've been doing this lately on my Instagram page. Check it out. It's probably one of my favorite things of the week. I get to learn a little bit more about sports. But did you know that on November 6, 1869, the first ever football game was played between Rutgers University and Princeton in New Jersey? And at the time, in 1869, over 50 years ago, the game rules were based loosely on the London Football Association's rule in 1863, which did not allow throwing or carrying the ball. So naturally, that mimicked the game of soccer more so than the game of football that we know today. So a very, very interesting statistic there. But in the late 1800s, Walter Camp, who is now coined the father of American football, he created the system of downs and the line of scrimmage, because previously they did not have that. So very, very interesting little sports fact. First football game ever played on record was 1869 between Rutgers and Princeton, but it was more really like soccer. And then, of course, Walter Camp changed the game, as we know, in the late 1800s. He's coined the father of American football for a very reason, that he did create 2 of the most important parts of football in the down system and the line of scrimmage. So that's a little sports fact. Thank you guys for tuning in. This has been a really, really fun show. Tune in next week. I'm pretty sure I've got a guest locked in. I'm really excited to have a guest on the show, and we're going to be discussing a whole range of topics. But again, you can find this episode on YouTube at the Long John Podcast tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can find this episode on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Again, this is episode 13, Philadelphia Eagles season 2023 season predictions. It's your host, Joseph Camperman from the Long John Podcast. Check me out on all my socials on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube at the Long John Podcast, and on Twitter at the Long John Pod. You're not going to want to miss any future episodes, as well as my weekly news sports report and videos that I'm dropping throughout the week. So check me out on all the socials. Again, this is your host, Joseph Camperman. It has been a wonderful time, and thank you again for tuning in. Until next time, guys, peace out.